Ephesians chapter number 5. Excuse me. Ephesians chapter number 5. And we're talking about understanding marriage. And big subject, difficult subject at times. But also a good one. We started out really with talking. Let me read a little bit here. Excuse me again. Sneezed earlier, and that causes all my sinuses to now start shifting around. So, all righty. If you haven't had an out-of-body experience when you sneezed, you don't know what I'm talking about. But I usually lift up out into the stratosphere after I sneeze, and then kind of float back down into myself. So. My armpits hurt. I feel like my fingertips split. They're bad. I don't like them. So anyway, all right, Ephesians chapter 5, verse number 21. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Wives, submitting yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, and he is Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. So he's wanting you to know that in verses 21 through 31, he's talking primarily about the Christ and the church. But he wants you to know in that nevertheless word that he's also talking about marriage. Yes, he's using marriage as an illustration, but he is still talking about marriage. And how can we properly reflect Christ's relationship with the church in our church if we're not reflecting that relationship in our marriage? And so we must reflect that relationship in our marriage. Now today, as we've said many times, I'll say it again, just briefly running down through the overview here, the backstory that we've gone through, is that there's a negative view of marriage in society today. Marriage is, a ball and chain. You got the groomsmen like to play jokes on the groom, and one set of groomsmen played a joke on the groom by writing "help me" on the feet, help on one foot and help me on the other, the bottom of his shoes. So that he wouldn't notice until he's kneeling at the altar with his new wife, and the auditorium notices "help me" on his shoes. And we jest and joke about marriage, and we talk about sorry wives for not sorry wives. We say sorry wives for the husbands you have to deal with, or vice versa. And this whole idea about marriage, and thank you, and it being a negative and causing issues in our lives. Many of us who grew up in broken homes don't want our kids to grow up in broken homes. So often they'll not marry, so that it's an easy out, an easy way to remove themselves from the situation. A negative thing. We want to remember and understand from the Bible that marriage is positive. We see it said that way in Genesis 2:24 and in Hebrews 13:4. And I won't go back to those scriptures. We've covered them already. But marriage is a beautiful picture. Here in Ephesians chapter 5, it's not just a positive thing, but it is a picture of our relationship with Christ and how when we leave the old man, when we leave, the old relationship with the devil, that adoption into the new life as a Christian, a child of God, a son of God, or a daughter of God, and the beautiful picture there is also of the bride of Christ and being a spouse to one spouse, that being Christ, and not going out and stepping out to others in our marriage with the Lord and also in our marriage with our wife or our husband. And it's a beautiful picture of that marriage. And our homes and our churches ought to reflect that picture of the loving, patient, kind groom, and then the faithful, respectful, loving bride, right? Where we love our groom who is Christ, and we are subject to Him. We fall under His authority. I've been reading a book. It's part of the aftercare of the Hope Addictions Ministry, the authority principle. So once you get through all your steps of the formula for life, you move into changing the garb and then the authority principle. Maybe not in that order. I'm still running that outline to get it finalized for next week. But not that part of the outline necessarily needs done by next week, because nobody will move into that quick. But I'm reading the authority principle. One of the things we have in our lives is we are not under our carnal authorities, so therefore we are not under our spiritual authority, right? And we cannot claim to be under God's authority and not be under our carnal authorities in those institutions of the church, the workplace, the home, and the government, right? And we fall under those authority positions in our life. When we rebel against those, we are in essence rebelling against God. And I know our first thought process in that is, well, I'm not going to listen to somebody who's not under God's authority. But that's not what we were talking about. We weren't talking about not listening to somebody not under God's authority. We're talking about we're not under the authority that God has put in place in those institutions. Therefore, we're not properly reflecting being under God's authority. Therefore, we're not going to find blessing in this life. We're not going to find. And God doesn't say, if they're not following me, they're not your authority. Basically, the one caveat is if they ask you to do something that God says is wrong. So there's nothing wrong with following the speed limit. There's nothing wrong with following our governmental authority and things we don't agree with but aren't anti-Christ, right? There's nothing wrong with at school or at work we don't agree with our boss, but they're not asking us to go against the Lord, so we fall under their authority. And there's nothing wrong in our homes, kids falling under the authority of their parents. The parent may not be a Christian, but the parent isn't asking the child to do something against God. Or the husband isn't asking the wife to do something against God. And therefore we have that authority. And we have it right here in this picture of a husband and a wife relationship reflecting our relationship with God. And if we're not living right in our marriages, we're not living right before the Lord. And how are we living right before the Lord? I mean, if we're not living right before the Lord, how are we calling ourselves spiritual? How are we calling ourselves right with Him? And this takes both two saved, Spirit-controlled people. So, husbands, you got to love your wives. Wives, you must reverence your husbands. You can't constantly be talking down. We're going to get to you in a minute. But let me finish going through the husband's role. That's where we are now. And last week we talked to the husband, and we took away any excuse the husband might have to inappropriately lord over or handle the relationship with his wife. We're supposed to portray God. All right? God does not force somebody into His mold. Well, there are consequences for not being there. And I don't mean husbands go kick your wife in the teeth. Consequence! God is going to take care of authority not being where it should be. You as a husband need to be a husband and love your wife and make the decisions you need to make after having gone to God. And if your wife won't fall in and follow her role in that, you're not there to beat her in the head. You're not there to belittle her. You're not there to drag her along. You're there to go to God and say, God, Would you take care of this? Would you help me with this? Would you help her attitude, help her spirit, help me to show her love so that she knows I'm safe and I care for her. Help me to go to you and make right decisions. So even if she doesn't agree with my decision, she thinks I'm a dumb butt for, why is my brain? You go to work all week, dumb things get in your head. So forgive me. Why am I, my wife, she may think you're dumb for doing what you're doing, right? She may think you're making a bad decision, but Lord, help me to make the right decision. So when I make it, and she thinks it's a bad decision, and then I come in and it's the right decision, and she can see that, and she can go, okay, he's making right decisions now. I remember years ago, there was a couple in a church, and the wife was in charge of everything. The husband had grown up in a fatherless home, and he hadn't learned how to do a lot of things in his life. He just didn't know how to do a lot of the manly things he should be doing. And so his wife did them all. And it was a great stress to her and a great difficulty to her. And one day she's in the preacher's office. She said, "Preacher, I just don't know how much I can take this. It's so stressful. How do I handle this and taking care of our kids and this and that and the other? And I want my husband to be a leader, but if I let him lead, things will fall apart." You know what the preacher said? Let it fall apart. But Pastor, you don't understand. Let it fall apart. Let him learn. Let him grow. Let his role be his role. They're not, can I also say this? I'm sure you know I think this, right? But neither role is subservient to another role. Neither role is less than the other role. All right? But each role has a place. And ladies, you will be in charge of your home for so long before your mind explodes because it's really not your place. And you're not geared. I know this is a broad brush. I understand some women are better at this than others. But you're not naturally geared for the stress of constantly making difficult decisions that have no right answer. And you can do it well. I know you can. I've seen lady after lady after lady after lady do it well. Single ladies, you have to do it well, right? But still, we're outside of that role, and it makes it difficult. Does that mean a lady can't have the great input into that? Probably has better input sometimes than we do. Probably. But we must emotionally guard our women as well, our ladies as well, and be like, listen, I am going to make that decision. I'm going to do that. And you don't have to be a jerk about it. Look, I understand. You ain't got the capacity to do it. It'll harm you emotionally and intellectually if you're constantly having to make decisions. So you know what? Just sit there. I'll make it. It's okay. That's a jerk and a dumb thing. All right? We got to work together. We're a partnership. Listen to your wife. She's not dumb. In fact, often, if I'd have listened to my wife more often, it would have been a shorter route. Now, it doesn't mean that she was always right, but she often brought insight in that I hadn't thought about. That I would have been plowing through a wall that she's like, hold on, there's a door over here. Appreciate that. Because I like to, sometimes I just see a need and I want to fill that need. And so I just go fill the need. I don't always like go, is there an easier way to do this? Right? And so like, I think about this. Yesterday or Friday afternoon, I got home a little early. I pulled up all the green metal flower bed liner that's around our house. It's around some of the walkways, and then we have this horseshoe in front of our house that's got a dead flower bed. I just want it all gone, and I want dirt and then grass, and then I'm going to line the border of our house with about 2 feet of gravel. You know, and no, nothing's going to grow there, and the water that comes isn't going to erode the foundation. It should be 2 feet of gravel, and every couple of years I'm going to bring a paint sprayer in and I'm going to paint it white. And that's my plan. But I had to pull all this out. Well, I pulled it all out Friday and nearly killed myself. I got a blister. That's terrible. I'm an office person, so hush. I had gloves in my truck because I went down to Grapeland to a shop tour and stuff, so I needed all my safety equipment. I had gloves sitting in my truck 5 feet from where I'm pulling this stuff up. I'm over here with a pick-o-matic, over here with no gloves on. I separated a callus, so it's a lot. It hurts a lot. But anyway, then my neighbor sees it all sitting there. I haven't finished. I still have the big horseshoe to finish, right? And I'm like, forget it. I got to let this get better. And so I stop, and I got this green border. My neighbor across the road says, hey, what are you doing with that? So I got to find somebody to take it. I'm going to throw it away. I'm probably going to go get a cut-off wheel and cut it into pieces because it's the stakes are rusted in. I don't want to deal with all that. And he said, oh, I need that over there. That stuff's expensive. My yard keeps washing into my sidewalk and stuff, so I need that border. I said, well, take it then. You know what this guy did? He also took the horseshoe out. If I were smart, I would have put out on Facebook, I got this stuff I need to get rid of, but you have to pull it up. 5-10 minutes, somebody would have been there with a pickaxe and they would have been taking that thing out. Because if nothing else, it's heavy metal that you can take over the recycle place and get you a couple of rocks from. You know, we've got a lot of meth heads. What's the husband's role? It's to make the decisions, love the wife. He's the head of the house, but like Christ is the head of the church. Compassionate, loving, and all those things. We covered all that last week. Concerned about long-term spiritual goals. It is not your wife's job to make you spiritual. It is your job to keep the spiritual temperature alive in the home. Right? And that does not mean, honey, did you do your devotion today? Why not? That might mean that you have to go about it in prayer, in gentleness, and kindness. But it does mean you can do a daily time with the Lord in the living room each evening. You know? And the wife doesn't want to come, then the wife doesn't come. I don't think we have any here like that, but if the wife doesn't want to come, she doesn't. And the wife's role. Now it's your turn, ladies. Now, I was not light or easy on the men last week, I don't think. Thought I was pretty difficult to them. And ladies, we're not going to be near as hard, all right? We're going to throw a few things out there. The wife, so the husband's to portray Christ. You remember what Christ did? He gave his life, right? Didn't he? He sacrificed. He didn't run around ranting and raving about how the church isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Oh, preacher, he went down into that temple and that was a house den of thieves instead of a house of prayer. And he turned them tables over. Preacher, every once in a while you got to turn your tables over at home. I got a table. We can sit across from it. And we can help you restore what you just broke. You're not Christ. And your wife didn't make your home into a den of thieves. So hush. Okay? I'm just sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I got to go back to you. Men in independent Baptist churches have really fumbled the ball. And then, you ever seen that football player like fumble the ball and then keep kicking it as he's trying to grab it? You watched me in 8th grade? Sorry. And I never got the ball in football in my 7th and 8th grade year because most of the time as down set hut, I was on my back watching people run through the hole they just created with me. And so, but anyway, but in my 7th grade year, I was scrawny and short. In my 8th grade year, I was scrawny and tall. So I had no chance on a line. I don't know what I was doing there. And so anyway, wife's role. So the husband portrays Christ in his kindness, in his sacrifice, in his leadership, in the spiritual temperature he sets in the home. Here's the wife. She portrays the church. Makes sense. You read it, you know it. Wife portrays the church. How? Subject to Christ. Subject to the husband. All right. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husband as unto the Lord. You're to submit yourself to your husband as the church submits to the Lord in everything. Caveat. Your husband asks you to do something that is anti-Christ. Look him in the eyes, stick out your tongue, turn around and walk on. All right? Don't do it. Other than that, your husband says, let's do this, and it's dumb. We got some other statements to make too. My wife saw something this morning. A marriage only survives, two boring people don't survive in a marriage, two exciting people don't survive in a marriage. The marriage that lasts the longest is a boring person and an exciting person. Yep, I'm the exciting person. And I told my wife this morning, I said, so when I'm out here trying to get us in an adventure, you just say, okay. Because I'm keeping our marriage together longer. And but no, truly though, think about this. Wives, you're the church. Husband is Christ, but he's not. He's not all-knowing, not all-wise, doesn't always make right decisions, but it's still here in the black and white of the Bible saying that we're to be subject to our husbands. Sometimes we men only learn through making dumb choices. It's unfortunate. Now, it is not wrong, ladies, to say, are you sure? Have you thought about this? Have you considered this? But here's where we go. Once we have done that, husbands, when they do that, shut your mouth, open up your ears, listen, because they probably have a point. Listen. And then ladies, once they've heard you, they're going to make a decision. And you stand back and don't say, well, I told you so. Or, I knew it was a dumb idea. Or, look, I've just been married 26 years, okay? And we weren't always right with the Lord. And then after we got right with the Lord, we still had to grow a lot. So, all these things. We're going to talk about reverence in a minute and how that follows into this. But you know what? Once you've had your say, whatever choice he makes, subject unto the husband as the church is subject unto Christ. Now, Christ will deal with your knuckleheaded husband. He will. I've seen it happen over and over. He won't deal with your knuckleheaded husband if you're calling him knuckleheaded. Because you know who he's going to be listening to? You, not Christ. And so when Christ is trying to help him with his knuckleheadedness, all he hears is you calling him a knucklehead. I know none of you ladies in here do that, neither does my wife. It just must be said, all right? This is a part women should probably teach, but it's still in the Bible. Subject to the husbands. See, it's to be subject in everything. It says in verse 24, therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Now, this is a sad state. My pastor used to say this all the time. He'd say, subject unto your own husbands. And he'd say it like that. Because so often a wife is subject to her boss, her pastor, somebody else, it's a male figure and somebody else's husband, and she'll listen to him, and she'll do what he says, and she'll be like, oh yes, pastor, and oh yes, boss, and what you say goes, and then she goes home, and this man who loves her, and this man who has provided for her, doesn't get the time of day from her. And so the pastor would say, own husbands. How sad is it to a husband that never gets listened to when everybody else gets taken care of? It's sad, and it happens, especially in church a lot, where wife's over here volunteering for everything at church. You seen this? She's volunteering for every little thing at church. She's taking care of it all. The pastor says, I need, and all of a sudden it's done. She's automatically known, and there are a handful of women in the church that are that way. But then at home, husband says, honey, you think we can? Do it yourself. Aren't you in charge of this place? Shouldn't you be doing that? Isn't that the husband's role? And the husband's like, yes, ma'am. We got a honey-do list 1,000 miles long. The wife helps at church or at work, but doesn't help at home. And so, and I'm not saying, I'm just kind of going through things I've experienced in life. She has to be subject in everything. Not just what you agree with, but what God puts out there. I mean, what the husband says, let's do this, might be crazy. You know, I do crazy things sometimes. Like one time, we packed up the car with a tent and 2 little children in October. And we drove to Yellowstone from Edgewood in a day. No, we didn't. We drove to the Badlands, stayed the night there in a cabin, and then over to Yellowstone the next day. We traipsed around the Badlands. So we might have stayed in the Badlands 2 nights, I don't remember. And then we go over to Yellowstone. It's October, guys. That means tent camping is not the best idea. So we got out, we set up the tent, we laid in that tent. And for about an hour, and Nikki's got a child in her belly. So we had 2 kids. It was Shelby and then Sabre was in the belly. That's how that went, if I remember right. And she was just freezing. And about an hour into that, we got out. of the tent. I packed up that tent in the dark. I shoved it back into our little Saturn SL1, I think is what we had at the time, little standard. And we drove around Yellowstone all night long with the heater on in the car, just driving around. Nothing's open, no gas stations open at that. This is 2001 too. No gas stations open, nothing. And we're driving around Yellowstone. You know what? That's still some of the greatest memories we had. Because some knuckle-headed 19-year-old or 20-year-old, whatever I was at that time, just said, let's do this! It's going to be cheap because we're going to go in a tent and it's going to be great. We'll just, we'll take snacks with us and we'll have a great time. All it's going to cost us is a tent spot, and we have all this food in our car, and we'll take this little camp stove because we used to camp a lot back then, and it's going to be great, and we're going to get in this little car, and all it's going to cost is gas and a cabin the next day that was very expensive because we had a great time. We've done that trip 3 times now, except we didn't take a tent the second time, the last 2 times. But we've gone up to the Badlands, spent some time in the Badlands in South Dakota, the Black Hills and stuff, and then we've gone over to Yellowstone. Some of the greatest memories we ever had because I did something dumb. And we weren't even hardly in church at that time. And my wife said, okay, let's go. We had a great time. Now, I'm not saying that it's always going to work that way. Sometimes you might be sitting there wishing you could take a shower and having to go to the truck stop because your water's off because your husband's dumb. And let me say this as well. She is to be cooperating with his goals for her. Husbands, wives, if your husband has a spiritual goal for you or he's trying to help you move forward in your life, let him. Let him do that. Listen to him. You might be helping him grow by listening to him. If you don't trust him, give him time. Ephesians 4:27 and 28, that he might present it to himself, Christ the church, the husband, the wife, not having a spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. Husband, your desire for your wife ought to be that she is spiritually mature. Wives, your desire ought to be to let your husband grow you. Ephesians 5, 26, 27. 25, 26, 27. Let your husband work in your life. Let your husband guide you spiritually. Okay, it's uncomfortable to do devotions together. Okay, if he wants to, let him. Might be growing him too. Excuse me. Verse 33, one more for that, and then we've got some little bit more discussion, about 10 more minutes. Nevertheless, let every one of you be, in particular, so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. I don't know this is the case here. It was the case at one point in my life. It's not anymore. Praise the Lord. But I would often spend money on myself, and my wife wouldn't get things. Now I worked enough hours, it was like 2 jobs. I did a lot of things, and my wife was always like, if Dad wants something, let's let him have it, because, Dad's working a lot. And I realize now how selfish that was and how rude that was. I appreciate my wife's compassion for me and concern for me. But at the same time, husbands, don't go run you go get all your toys and take care of all your things and get everything you want, and your wife doesn't get anything. I'm not saying that your wife should get everything she wants either. We need to quit being such a spoiled society that everything you click on you buy. But husbands, see that your wife's needs are met. Anticipate. Pay attention. Listen. If you can't remember, write things down. Get you a little AI. I've got an AI voice recorder so that when I'm over here having conversations at work or something, I'm recording the sermons because it takes a little bit of time to get them from the live to the not live so that I can pull stuff out of it. It's usually like Monday or Tuesday. And so I want to have this so I can kind of look through and see if there's anything pertinent that I want to pull back out. But if you have to, get your little keep note out, and write something down that your wife just said. Pay attention. Anticipate her needs. Love her like yourself. Then, wives, listen. Reverence her husband. That word reverence. It means to respect, to honor, to set on a pedestal, right? I'm not saying be a little sycophant, right? I'm not saying that at all. But reverence your husband. There's two things. There's a lot of psychology here that I don't, I could say this. It's right there in the Bible, do it. But, we used to at the state hospital, we'd take a kid who was a just terrible kid. He was a terrible kid. But he'd been there a while. That's why he's been there a while. And somebody new would come in and we'd say, hey, come here, new person. Here's bad kid, we'd say his name. This kid's been here a while, knows the rules, knows the routines. He's got this place down. He will help you transition and have a good experience and be able to get your feet where they need to be so that you can work the program and you can go home to your family that much sooner. This person knows all those things. He's a jerk. He didn't follow one rule. Well, we put them together, and all of that was true. Because you can't go against the rules so well and not know them. We put them together. It was amazing, not every time, but it was amazing how often that bad kid became the next good kid. And he was out of that place before too long. Because you gave him a position to say, you do know, and you can help this kid. We would take people from the adult units over to the clothing store, and every once in a while somebody would donate a suit or two to the clothing store, so there'd be a nice suit over in the clothing store, and we'd take a guy over there and fit him, and we'd dress him up in that suit. He'd walk back on that unit, up, feeling good. Listen, ladies, reverence your husband. Honor him. Thank him. When he doesn't do anything right, yeah, he does somewhere, somehow, sometime. Somewhere, somehow, sometime. You can say, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you get up every day and you go to work. I wish you'd do this around the house and that around the house. No, I appreciate that you come home to me every night. And we talk about things. I appreciate that you helped me get into this position. You helped me, a lot of us here, we grow up in broken homes, and either the wife helped the husband get confidence or vice versa. The husband helped the wife move forward and get some confidence. I sure appreciate that. I appreciate that every time I turn a light switch on, there's power. Well, I pay the bills. So, I'm just saying, appreciate him. Husbands, you got better do the same thing. But, I appreciate, let's you draw more flies with honey, right? Thank him. Appreciate him. Give him if he's a gifts person, get him a gift every once in a while. Gift people, you don't have to go get a car. You can go get a keychain from, the gas station, Get him a gift. Say you're thankful. Appreciate. I just see a lot of times where a wife, and I see this in the husbands, and I'll punch them in the face. It's fine. It's just terrible. But I see it a lot of times in wives where a wife gets into the position of she's been hurt or things like that, or she grew up in a poor home, a difficult home. When I say poor, I don't mean necessarily money. I just mean a poor home, difficult home. And she's translated that into what she used to think about her father into her husband. And now her husband is dumb, stupid, incapable, and she says all these things all the time about her husband. I'm going to tell you this right now. It is my directive as your pastor, my challenge to you as a pastor from the Word of God. Reverence your husband. From this moment forward, not one more time should you say anything derogatory. Not one more time should you nag, belittle, should you lower him. Look, if he's a jerk, a dumb bunny, if there's nothing you can do with him, we'll deal with that a different way. Right? If he's abusive, steps out, if he drinks all the time or does drugs, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with it. But other than that, find a way to not ever again belittle. Can I give you a secret, ladies? When you give your husband a task to do and he doesn't do it, it's not because he forgot, he just hasn't gotten to it or whatever. Maybe he doesn't respect you enough to put it a high priority. I get that. That's another thing too. But it's not that if you say it 4 more times, he's going to suddenly go, oh yeah, I needed 5 times. Nope. All you're doing, every time past the first time, all you're doing is saying you're not good enough. We'll deal with why he's not. We can deal with all that, all right? But you're not good enough or whatever. Yes, for my wife, and maybe for you, I do need reminders every once in a while. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I'm not talking about reminding somebody who has a hard time remembering. I'm talking about constantly on somebody about doing something. All you're doing is probably what their parents did too. And you're making them feel less because they didn't get it done. We want to reverence our husbands. I don't have one, but you. And husbands, it makes it easier to reverence you if you'd be lovable. If you would put them before you. Okay, she gave you something to do and you've got something to do. Do her thing first. Make it easier. Let me see if there's anything else worth saying today. There's a lot in this. There's a lot in this. Let's talk next week about spirit controlled in a marriage. Being spirit controlled in a marriage. It has a lot to do with, if you say this week, man, I don't like what you had to say about all that stuff, just suspend your disbelief for a little while. You know, you watch a movie. You know how you can watch a movie and get into that movie and laugh in that movie and jump in that movie? You know how you do that? There's this little thing called suspension of disbelief. When you turn on the movie, your brain turns off your disbelief. And for a time, you believe everything in that movie. Otherwise, you wouldn't jump. You wouldn't laugh. You wouldn't get excited. You wouldn't hope that he's going to win the race. You know? That's like when you watch the Cowboys play. Every time your disbelief is suspended. I'm just kidding. But what am I trying to say? Suspend your disbelief for a little bit. Trust what I'm telling you out of God's Word. Right? And we're going to talk next week about being spirit controlled in a marriage. How those things tie in together. Right? If you're not reverencing your husband, is your walk right with God? No. If you're not loving your wife, is your walk right with God? No. It's not. I don't care what you say. Well, I fed 1,000 people this week, so. I painted the church for you this week, Pastor. Don't care. Look, I gave my tithes. Well, we need it, but don't care. Because you're not right with God. You're not loving your wife. You're not reverencing your husband. You're not being submissive. You're not taking care of her spiritual needs. Maybe if you took care of your wife's spiritual needs, she'd be spiritual enough to reverence you. But we're scared. We are. Both parties are scared because it's vulnerable and it might not work. And then I put myself out there and it didn't work. Well, God didn't tell you only if it works. He told you in Ephesians 5, do this. And that's what I want you to do. All right, dear Father, we love you so much, Lord, and I thank you for the truths out of your word. And I pray that you help us with this. I pray that you give each side, each party truth, help them to assimilate that truth, to come to faith in the truth we've taught.